All right, we're going to go over Chapter 11 and Chapter 12 today. Before we do, just a couple things to remind you. First thing is, again, there will be class on Friday, but I won't be here. This wall will be open, and Mr. Knott will be either having a piece of paper for you all to sign or whatever. All right, and he has to leave early today. He's got a mother with a medical condition. He has to take her to the hospital today. So at 11, right before 11 o'clock, he's going to open up the wall, and I have to kind of watch his class for the last 55 minutes. All right? All right. Again, so I won't be here Friday. In fact, you can see what kind of fun I've been having. Okay? And I went and read that, and I wrote my speech today. It can't at all marvel or even be close to the one that my brother did about a year ago with his daughter, because believe it or not, his was 30 minutes long. That's what happens when you have too much alcohol before you go out and give a father of the bride speech. All right. I don't drink, so I don't think that's going to be any kind of an issue. So again, today we're going to go over Chapter 11 and Chapter 12. Tomorrow, the rest of the period will be lab. Tomorrow, I'm going to do a test review with you for Chapter 11, for Chapter 12. All right? Wednesday, we're going to take written tests for Chapter 11 and Chapter 12. All right? And then Thursday, you're going to have your hands-on test. And it'll be basically on 8, which was responsive web design. Not going to put anything in there from 9, which was Flexbox, or 10, which was the grid layout. But I will have stuff in from 11 and 12. So it'll basically be on 8, 11, and 12. All right? Tom did email me this weekend. I don't know if I still have it up here or not. And he said, please let your students know that I'm impressed with their work, and we'll let you know this week about verbiage and pictures I would like to use in the website. Well, he sent me some more pictures today, and he rewrote the intro. All right, so I'm going to give you that stuff when you're taking the test on Thursday. All right, I mean, because hopefully, slowly but surely, this website is melding its way into shape. All right. I figured out a way for him to be able to access every one of your websites, and he has done so. Okay. So jumping back in here, the first thing we're going to go over today is Chapter 11. Chapter 11, as it says right here, is how to work with images and icons. We were introduced to working with images back in Chapter 3. The only icons that we've really talked about, really in any depth or breadth of coverage, have been favicons. All right, but you may or may not be aware of this. But if you go out to, and you don't have to do this, but if you go out to fontawesome.com, they literally have somewhere around 5,000 icons that you can use out there. Why am I telling you that? Because that you will need to go out there for your test. For instance, if I go out there, and I think it's been a while, there's icons. So if I go out there and, for example, if I search and say Facebook, is that pretty obvious what you're getting right there? You're going to put links on Tom's website, probably to Facebook, to LinkedIn, I don't know what else. He'll probably tell me, I know he has a Facebook account, but I will, if I tell him to get a Twitter account, he'd probably laugh at me. All right? But I'm going to ask him anyway, and maybe Instagram, I don't know. All right? But the point is, you may want to take a look at fontawesome.com. You can even download the icons from there. You can do it now if you want to, but you don't have to. All right. So when you look here, basic skills for working with images. Guess what? You know most of those basic skills. You know the fact that you need the source attribute. You know the fact that you need the alt attribute. You know that either in the image itself or in the CSS, it's a good idea to put in the height and the width rather. If you don't put those in, it still works just fine. But especially if you've got a more intricate image, it takes the system longer to load the image. Because if you give it the height and the width, it knows how much space to lay out. All right? All right, so we'll look at basic skills, some advanced skills. and some related skills. All right. I will tell you too, hopefully you're still working your way through that bootstrap homework and the other stuff that we looked at. All right. I don't know any other way to say this than to say this. I don't like Evan's exercise, his labs, or his homework for chapters 11 and 12. So tonight I'm going to have to write my own. The point is that won't be available till tomorrow because right now it's still up in my head someplace. But when you come in tomorrow, I will have, either a hard copy or electronic or both of what you'll have to do for chapters 11 and 12. All right. Now, types of images for the web. I have not even looked at your test, the written test for chapter 11, but my guess is this stuff will all be on it. Here are the 4 main types of fonts. All right. Are there other ones? Of course there are. All right. But these are the 4 main ones. The first one are JPEGs. Sometimes a JPEG has got a .jpg extension. Sometimes a JPEG has got a .jpeg extension. They're both JPEGs. All right. And it actually stands for Joint Photography something group. I don't remember what. I don't really care. All right. But by and large, JPEGs have got high quality. So they're typically, if you go and you've got a picture, for example, you might have noticed that virtually all of the pictures that I've saved for you, Tom and his dog, Tom and his cat, and when he hates that picture of him and the cat. He's like, oh my God, you put that picture in there. I hate that picture. Well, he's giving me other ones. That's fine. But pictures like that, they are typically going to be JPEGs. Now, notice what it says. It's typically used for scanned images because it uses a type of compression that can display complex images with a small size. All right? It can represent millions of colors. It loses information when compressed. What they're saying there is not if it's maybe a 100 by 100 and you make it a 50 by 50, it's not so much there that it's going to lose information, but when you start tweaking it in ways that it's not meant to be tweaked, it can lose information. All right? And as it says, it doesn't support transparency. So you can't work basically with opacity with it. Next are GIFs. All right? And GIF is typically used for a logo. It's cheesier. It's cheaper. All right? And what I mean is if you've ever seen, for instance, if you got some kind of a company and their logo is the letter of the alphabet they are. That might be a GIF file, that kind of thing. All right? Notice it can only represent up to 256 colors, while JPEGs can show millions of colors. All right? They don't lose information when you compress them. They support transparency, and they allow you to do kind of cheap little graphics. All right? Now, I'm dating myself here when I tell you this. So when I tell it to you, you might be like, what are you talking about? But I remember when I was a little kid, you couldn't do this with school books because, of course, we didn't own them. But if I bought a book of my own, I'd make a little picture on a page near the end of like the bottom of a rocket, and I'd keep making pictures all the way through. So when I went through my pages, it looked like the rocket was going off. You know what I'm talking about? All right. The reason I'm saying that is that's kind of the cheap little animation that you typically do with GIFs. All right. It's not production quality typically. All right. Then you've got pings. I think that's portable network graphic. Notice it says they're typically used as a replacement for GIFs. All right. They're smaller than GIFs. No information is lost. Unlike GIFs, which only have 256 colors, they support millions of colors. And they're supported by all modern browsers. What you may have noticed today is if you start looking and saving pages, or images, more and more of these are now WebP images. Notice a modern format that is used as a replacement for PNG and JPEG. I'm not going to read the rest to you. All right. The big thing about these, and you may or may not have ever heard of what I'm about to show you, but there is a product out there that's called GIMP. Yeah, that's their little logo. If you decide that you're working on a website, be it Tom's, your own, whatever, and you want to start being able to manipulate the sizes of images, This is a free package that you can use to do that. All right. There are other packages out there. There's Photoshop and a lot of other ones, but they cost money. This is free. Since it's free, you don't have quite the power with this that you have with Photoshop and some other thing, but it's free. All right. So, how to include an image on a page. Guess what? You know that already. You know every one of those attributes that are in that first table. You have used them before. You will continue to use them. All right? Where it'll change is rather than us putting in a height and a width, as we go and we want our images to be responsive, we're more concerned rather than height and width, we're concerned with being able to size in other ways. All right? Notice with height and width, with both of them when you use CSS, a relative or absolute value. You're going to be talking more of a relative value if you want things to be responsive. All right? In fact, if you've gone through that bootstrap exercise, you'll notice that there's different image classes that you can use. There's image responsive and there's image fluid. All right, to try to make things scale as you make your page bigger and smaller. All right, but the bottom line is this. You want images to look good regardless of who's looking at them and what they're using to look at them. I mean, I can read that stuff to you, but you know this already. There's nothing new there. There should be nothing there that's surprising you. All right, notice how to align an image vertically. All right, you can work with vertical alignment in a lot of different ways. One thing to remember, we talked about this in a much earlier chapter, when we talked about the box model. And I said that everything's inside of a box, whether that box is visible or invisible. And that includes an image. So let's suppose, for example, this is my image. Well, that wouldn't look real bad. I mean, you look at it there, and it kind of looks like it's centered on there. But if you were to vertically align it at the top, that's literally where it would be all the way up to the top. You can vertically align it on the bottom, on the left, on the right. All right? And you probably do it in different ways depending on the image, the amount of size you have, the look you're trying to attain, etc. So when you do this, these are the ways that you can set that up. All right? And they give you some examples on here. All right? Now, you look at this and you go, okay, before and after they're aligned. They don't look any different. Yes, they do. For example, notice each one of these, by default, they go to the bottom of the image. Now, they're in the center of the image. Sometimes just putting in a vertical alignment isn't enough. You have to also go in and you have to play with the CSS, all right, in order to make, you might have to tweak it a few pixels or whatever. All right. Float. We all love floats, right? Right. Notice the properties for floating images. You can float left, you can float right, you cannot float. All right? You've already done this. There's not a lot I'm going to be able to put on your next test for this. You've already done it. You remember on the home page, it's Tom and his cat, and that's floated. All right? And I believe on the second page, rather, with Tom and Lily, his dog, that was floated. All right? You are going to be replacing that picture on the home page with whatever one he wants or sends me. But again, you already know how to float. All right, advanced skills for working with images. Notice how to use the HTML5 figure and fig caption elements. What you should notice, I've done this many times for you already, if I go out to caniuse.com and I put in fig caption, you'll notice basically it's supported everywhere on every browser. Again, with IE, before IE11, might have some issues. I don't know. All right? But the idea behind these, all right, there's a figure, there's the caption that goes under it. All right? Do you have to use figure captions? Of course not. All right? But you probably, everybody has seen this, either if you've been online and you looked at a CNN or you looked at a newspaper or if you've got an actual hard copy of a newspaper, that most of the time when they have a picture, they have some text underneath it explaining what the picture is. All right? And that's what they're talking about here. Now, when you use this, notice how it's used. You've got a figure tag, and inside of the figure tag, you've got your image. And inside of your image, or under the image, you've got your figure caption. All right? Which, as it says right here, you can take the figure, you can take the figure caption, you can set it up with CSS. All right? Another way it says there to add an image to a page is to use the picture element. This is typically used for one of two purposes. First, it can display a different image depending on screen size. Sometimes people like that rather than using something like Bootstrap or something to make it responsive, you might have a very little thumbnail that you use on phones, a bigger one that you use for tablets, and a bigger one than that you use for laptops and desktops. All right? And they give an example in here. Again, it's using the picture element. And when you use that, that's what you're saying. And when you look at this, it's almost as if that's a media query. Because, again, what the author is saying there is for 960 and above, you want to use Mountains 1. For 768 to 959, you want to use Mountain 2. For 460 to 767, you want to use Mountain 3. All right? Otherwise, you want to use Mountain 4. Okay, so again, that gives you the opportunity to use a different image. It's usually the same image, just the size is different. All right? Now, turning up to page 404 here, how to do image rollovers. There are many ways of doing image rollovers. Again, I'm not asking, but my guess is you've all seen one. All right? For many years now, I've been fighting my weight. All right? And one of the things I do is I go out to different sites. All right? I'm still looking for that magical site that has the all-you-can-eat pizza diet. All right? And no exercise, and we guarantee you'll lose a ton of weight, because that's the diet I'm waiting for. Haven't found it yet. But the point is, if you go out to a lot of sites, you'll see a picture quite often of a man or a woman who's overweight. And you take your mouse and you put it on their picture, and it shows them after they've lost a lot of weight. That's an image rollover, where you take the mouse and you put it on something. I have no idea if any of the pictures, any of the stuff Tom's given me would work with image rollovers, but I'd kind of like it if it did, if we could have one of them. All right, as it says, back in chapter 1, we learned that an image rollover occurs when the mouse hovers over an image and the image is replaced by another image. It says, although JavaScript is typically used for this, it's not mandatory that you do it with JavaScript. Now, what's going to happen is typically if you don't use JavaScript or if you don't use CSS transitions, which is basically the subject, I think, of chapter 16, it might look a little choppy. In other words, if I take my mouse and put it here and the picture changes, it might look very rough with that. All right, so there are ways to make it look a little bit nicer, but we're just learning it right now. All right, so notice what you're doing otherwise. What you're saying is, hey, if I hover over the image, I want the background image to change. So it should show this image right here all the time, unless I take my mouse and I'm literally have it placed inside of that image. And then once I move out, that goes back again. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. So as it says, it's an image that gets changed when the mouse hovers over it. And this is one way of doing it. All right? All right. Image maps. Question for you. Have you all seen something like this? Where you've got a map of the United States, for example, and if you take your mouse and you put it over any one of the states and you click on it, it'll give you the home page for that state. That's an image map. Another real popular use for it is if you are a medical student, you might see a thing of a human anatomy where you can click on the elbow and it'll show you all the bones that are connected in the elbow or the hand or whatever. All right. So it says that's probably what you've seen. If you wanted to find an image map, you use the IMG, the map, and the area elements. And most people, when they see this and they hear about it, they feel like they're somewhat constricted. All right. And what I mean is this. This is an example right here that you could use. It's a crummy one, but that you could use of an image map. What I want you to understand is this right here, this shape. Oh, that was nice. All right. And you'll notice with the shape, you can have an image map that's circular. You can have one that's rectangular, but the real power is when you use poly. Because when you use poly, you can set it up so that it's got a very weird shape. All right. Circular supposes that it's either elliptical or circular in nature. Rectangular, that it's either a square or a rectangle. But for a polygon, it can be virtually anything. Now, I had a really nice example, and it's funny. This morning, I emailed my old lab assistant, who's back in Janesville, Wisconsin, and I asked him. I said, "John, do you still have some copies of the stuff?" What I did was I created an image map for people that had Mount Rushmore on it. All right, something most people know, have seen, whether you've been there or not. But the idea was I set it up so if you put your mouse over any one of the individual presidents and you clicked, it would go to that individual president's homepage. All right, just as an example of how that can be used. Again, will you have an image map on your next test? I don't know. If it's up to me, yeah. But I have to sit there and think about how that would be used. All right? And have you set it up in a way that would make sense for you to use. All right. When to use an image editor, rather. It says when you use images on a web page, you want them to be the right size and the format. All right? And they mention Photoshop. There is a monthly subscription you can get for as little as $10 a month. I would never ask you to do that. All right? Now, if you graduate from here, so Chase graduates, okay, it's 2020, I guess, 2020 in May, and he graduates and decides, what I want to do is I want to work out of my own house. You're probably going to want to get Photoshop. You're going to want the stuff that you create for other people to look as, not only as presentable, all right, but as professional as possible. All right. They do mention GIMP in here someplace too. All right. Typically, when you use things like this, again, you can go in here and you can say, I want to change the height and the width. All right. Now, when you do that, the system will always try to change it as best it can. But as an example, let's say that the width was 600 and the height was 200. In other words, it was very wide, but not very tall. If you try to change it using one of these things from 600 by 200 to 200 by 600, for example, it may look a little funky. The software will always do the best it can to accommodate what you're asking for. All right? But it's not the software, it's actually what you're trying to work with the software on. All right. I've mentioned this before. I want to say it again about how to get images. And that is, be very careful. Don't ever go out to someone else's site and grab their images and put them on your website. If for some reason you feel you have to do that, before doing that, email them and say, I would like permission. They may say no, but you can link to an image on my site. Then it's up to you to do that or not do that. But if they say, yeah, you can do that, make sure at a minimum you've got an email that says that from them. Ideally, what many companies do with stuff like that is they may literally have a PDF form that you have to fill out. All right? Now, when they talk here about Creative Commons, the idea with Creative Commons, I'm not going to read this to you. All right? But they've got attribution through no derivative works. All right? With attribution, you've got to say, hey, this photo was brought to you courtesy of so-and-so. If you go to the other end of the spectrum, all right, non-commercial, etc., with the stuff that's in there, with some of them, you can just use them. And there are plenty of sites out there that will allow you to use free images. All right? And it's funny because I've looked at a couple that Rankin has, and I don't know where, I've never even did a view source on them. But I'm like, wow, I really have a hard time believing that was somebody from Rankin. So I think they go out to some of these free sites and grab some stuff. All right, for student life or whatever. So as it says, with Creative Commons, the license can restrict the use to one or more of the conditions listed above. All right. All right. Finally, again, I mentioned Font Awesome to you before. And when you use Font Awesome, okay, there's other icon libraries also. I'm not going to read these. You can see them. This is typically what you have to put in order to be able to use Font Awesome. Most people tend to put it near the bottom of their body section, with that gray line in there. And once you use that, you're able then to go in and do stuff like this. All right. They even give you examples in there on how to use it. So if you go and download it, and then you click on one of the icons, typically it'll have a little code snippet that says this is what you have to put in. All right. They want you to do it correctly. Now, one thing about this, if you look up on the screen here as an example, and this is not a good example right here, but let's pretend for a second that rather than web, that was a Facebook icon. All right. By default, when you put that out there, it puts a Facebook icon. But by default, if you click it, it goes to facebook.com. It doesn't go to that person's Facebook site. All right. So I will ask Tom this week, hey, if I have the students put a Facebook icon on there, is it okay if they go right to your site? And if he's got a Facebook page. If he said, yeah, then I'll give you that. If he says no, then we just won't do anything. We'll put the icon out there, but it will just go to the generic site. All right, this how to create favicons. Hopefully you've already done this. But if I go to Favicon Generator, this is the one I've been using, this one right here, Favicon and App Icon Generator. Click there, and what I've been doing lately is, the only one that I check here is generate only a 16 by 16, and I maintain the image, and I don't want it in a public gallery. So if I click Create a Favicon, well, it's going to give me an error because it needs a file. But if I click right there, I just find the file that I'm looking for. Boom, that's it. There's really not a whole heck of a lot more to it than that, and a lot more than you have to worry about it than that. So they give you some favicons, some programs that you can use with favicons. Probably would be a good idea to know what a favicon is. All right, you can see I've got a ton of them up here on the system right now. All right, and I think this is the last part of the chapter. They talk about working with SVG. SVG is an acronym, as you can see, that stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. Typically, they're used if you want to create your own images, because then you've got control over the size, etc., that you're going to use. Now, if you look here, these are the attributes that you would typically use for this. All right, they give you an example, and it's something like this. Now, did they do this? No. They still probably had somebody who went, and that's the Muroc logo, who created that for them. But if you want something where you create a logo, and that logo is your own. Tom already has a logo. It's on his business card. But if, for instance, he was just starting up and didn't have one, you could do so. You could use something like that to create one. All right. And that's it for the chapter. So again, what we will do tomorrow is we'll go over the, what we call the basics of Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. All right. And then we'll go over the advanced Favicon. test review for this chapter, but you should know the 4 common formats. By now you should know how to use height and width. You should know that you can also use CSS to assign. You should know about the HTML5 figure element and the fig caption element. All right. You should know what an image rollover is, what an image map is. You should know how to resize an image. All right. Again, you should know the difference between GIFs and PNGs, etc. We've talked about those already. Have a good idea of what favicons are and what SVG or scalable vector graphics are. I'm not going to have you do anything with SVG. All right. There are plenty of really good tutorials out there that if you want to learn, all right, that you can get some really good examples of what to use and how to use them.